His hand was already on the door handle when the boy's voice cut through the morning like a blade through silk. "Come with me. Now." Joon-ho Park did not turn around. For one full second, his entire body simply stopped, fingers frozen against warm chrome, breath caught somewhere between his throat and his chest, the gate's iron bars catching the early light behind him like the bars of something he hadn't yet realized he was standing inside. 40 years of instinct, boardrooms, hostile takeovers, men twice his size trying to rattle him across negotiating tables, none of it had prepared his nerves for the sound of a child's voice telling him not to get in his own car. He would remember this exact second for the rest of his life. Not because of what the boy said. Because of what his own body already seemed to know, a full breath before his mind caught up. Whatever happens next, stay with this story, because it only gets heavier from here. If it grips you, hit like, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe so the next one finds you too. 6 days earlier, none of this had a shape yet. Joon-ho sat across from his wife at the long kitchen table, sunlight pooling across the marble the way it did every morning at exactly this hour, and read his phone the way he had read it for 19 years, half attention, half habit, the rest of him already 3 meetings ahead. Angel was peeling an orange with the unreasonable precision she brought to everything, the rind coming off in one long unbroken spiral. "You're doing the thing again," she said, not looking up. "What thing?" "The thing where you're at the table but you're not at the table." He smiled, the small, automatic smile of a man who'd been caught doing the same thing for 2 decades and had long since stopped feeling guilty about it. "I'm here," he said. "Ask me anything." "What did I just say?" "You said I'm doing the thing again." "Lucky guess." She finally looked up, and for a moment, just a moment, he saw her the way he used to, 20 years back, before the company had a name, before the harbor warehouses became a logistics empire, before any of it. Back when she used to fall asleep in his car outside his father's restaurant in Koreatown because neither of them could afford to heat both of their apartments that winter. Back when an orange split between 2 people was breakfast, not a gesture. He didn't know, sitting there, that this was the last ordinary breakfast they would ever share. He would think about that, later, more than almost anything else, that the end of something can sit right next to you, pouring coffee, and you won't feel it coming. The town car was already idling at the gate by 8:15. His driver of 11 years, Marcus Webb, usually waited with the rear door open and his phone in his other hand, scrolling something he'd pretend to put away the second Joon-ho appeared. Today the man at the gate was doing neither. He stood very still, hands folded in front of him, like someone who had been told to wait but not how to look natural doing it. Joon-ho noticed none of this yet. His mind was already in a boardroom across the city, already negotiating a shipping contract that would either save or sink the quarter. He walked the stone path toward the gate with his briefcase in one hand and his phone in the other, the same walk he'd made 10,000 mornings before this one. He was 20 feet from the car when a small hand closed around his sleeve. "Don't move." The voice was barely above a whisper, but something underneath it made every other sound in the morning go quiet, the birds, the hum of the idling engine, even his own thoughts. He looked down. A boy, maybe 10 years old, in a faded gray hoodie 2 sizes too big, had stepped out from behind the hedge like he'd been crouched there for an hour, waiting for exactly this window. "What did you say?" Joon-ho asked, more confused than alarmed. "Come with me." "Now," the boy said again, louder this time, his small fingers tightening. "Please, sir. Don't get in that car." Joon-ho recognized him, vaguely, the housekeeper's son. He'd seen him a handful of times trailing behind his mother across the back lawn, carrying laundry baskets twice his size, never once speaking. He could not remember the boy's name. He felt a flicker of something between irritation and pity. "Son, I appreciate it, but I'm late for. If you get in that car, you're not coming back." The boy's voice cracked slightly on the last word, not from fear of being wrong, but from the specific terror of being right and not believed. "I heard them. Last night. In the kitchen. Please." Something cold moved through Joon-ho's chest, quick, involuntary, gone almost as fast as it came. He had built an empire on the principle of never reacting to the unverified. He did not change his morning because a child told him to. But he looked at the man by the car again. Really looked this time. The driver was the right height. The right build. The same dark jacket Marcus always wore. Everything correct, except for one detail that landed in Joon-ho's chest like a dropped glass. Marcus Webb wore his late father's wedding ring on a chain around his neck, always visible at the collar, a habit Joon-ho had teased him about exactly once, years ago, at the company holiday party. The man standing at the gate had no chain. No ring. Nothing at his collar but skin. "How do you know what you heard was about me?" Joon-ho said quietly, his eyes still fixed on the stranger 30 feet away. "Because they said your name," the boy whispered. 3 times. "And they said," he stopped, swallowed. "They said your wife already paid them half. The rest comes after." For one long moment, Joon-ho Park did not breathe. He had negotiated against governments. He had sat across from men who wanted to bankrupt him and walked away with their signatures on his terms. None of it, not one boardroom, not one hostile bid, not one sleepless night protecting everything he'd built from nothing, had prepared him for the particular stillness of standing in his own driveway, 20 feet from his front door, suddenly unsure which of the 2 people closest to him in the world wanted him alive. "Walk with me," he said finally, his voice flat and very quiet. "Slowly. Toward the side of the house. Don't run." The boy nodded and let go of his sleeve. They moved together along the edge of the property, past the koi pond his daughter used to feed before she left for college, past the low stone wall, until they were behind a thick row of camellia bushes that blocked the view from the gate entirely. Joon-ho knelt down so he was eye level with the boy for the first time. "What's your name?" "Adams." "Adams." Joon-ho said it like he was filing it somewhere important, somewhere it wouldn't get lost. "Tell me everything. Slowly. From the beginning." Adams's shoulders were shaking, but his voice steadied as he spoke, the way a person's voice does when they've rehearsed something in their head so many times the words finally know where to go on their own. "My mom was finishing up in the kitchen last night. I wasn't supposed to be up, but I came down for water. The lights were off, but the patio door was open a little, and I heard 2 voices. One was a man I didn't know. One was..." He hesitated. It was Mrs. Park. Something in Joon-ho's chest folded in on itself, quiet and total, like a building collapsing from the inside with no sound at all. If your stomach just dropped the way his did, you are exactly where this story wants you. Like the video, drop a comment with 1 word for how you're feeling right now, and subscribe because what Adams says next changes everything. "What did you hear?" Joon-ho asked, and his voice did not shake, because 20 years of boardrooms had taught him exactly how to keep a voice from shaking even when everything underneath it was breaking apart. "The man said the driver's been switched. Said you wouldn't notice because you never look up from your phone in the morning." Mrs. Park said, Adams's eyes filled with something too old for a 10-year-old's face. "She said after today, she'd finally be free." Joon-ho stayed crouched behind the camellias, one hand pressed flat against the cool stone wall, the other still gripping his briefcase like it was the last solid thing left in the world. The town car's engine hummed faintly from the gate. Patient. Indifferent. Waiting for a man who might never come back if he walked the 20 feet he was supposed to walk. "Do you have anything else?" he asked quietly. "Anything you can show me?" Adams reached into the front pocket of his hoodie and pulled out an old phone, the screen cracked in one corner, held together with a strip of clear tape. "My mom gave me her old one when she got a new one," he said. "It still records. I was scared, so I pressed the button and held it near the door." Joon-ho took the phone the way a man takes something he is afraid will shatter in his hands. 1 file. 11 minutes, 40 seconds. He pressed play. The first sound was dishes settling in a sink. Then the soft slide of a patio door. Then Angel's voice, warm, familiar, the exact voice she used at dinner parties, at his mother's funeral, in bed at 2 in the morning when neither of them could sleep, saying words that did not belong to the woman he had built an entire life around. "It has to look ordinary. He has to get in the car himself. If anything looks wrong, the police will find it in a day." A man's voice answered, slower, careful, reciting something memorized. "He will. He never varies his morning. New driver knows the route. There's a stretch past the Sepulveda overpass where the road narrows. That's where it happens." A pause. The soft clink of ice in a glass. And the policy, the man asked. Pays out in 7 months, Angel said. Accidental death, double indemnity. No contest, no other beneficiary. Everything moves to me. He never even read the page where I added the rider. He signs whatever I put in front of him. Joon-ho closed his eyes. He remembered that page. He remembered a stack of documents on a hotel desk in Singapore, a lawyer's finger tapping the line, the words standard, administrative, nothing to worry about, and he remembered being tired, and not asking, because he trusted her the way you trust gravity. Without thinking about it at all. He did not let himself listen to the rest. He looked at Adams, who was watching him with the patient, exhausted eyes of someone who had spent all night being brave completely alone. Your mother, Joon-ho said carefully. Does she know you recorded this? No, sir. Good. I need you to keep it that way. Not because she did anything wrong. Because the fewer people who know right now, the safer everyone is. Can you do that for me? Adams nodded, and for one strange second, something close to a smile flickered at the corner of his mouth. You're, like, really calm for someone who just found out his wife wants him dead. Despite everything, despite the floor of his entire life dropping out from under him in real time, Joon-ho almost laughed. Almost. I run a company with 4,000 employees, he said. If I panicked every time something tried to kill me, I'd never get anything done. It wasn't much of a joke. But Adams huffed out something that was almost a laugh too, and for one breath, the morning felt survivable again. Can I ask you something? Adams said, the laugh already gone from his voice. Anything. Are you gonna be okay? It was such a small question, and such an enormous one, that Joon-ho found he didn't have an answer ready the way he usually did. He had answers for boards of directors, for journalists, for his own legal team. He didn't have one for a 10-year-old asking with complete sincerity whether a grown man was going to survive his own marriage. I don't know yet, he said finally, because it was the only true thing he had. But I know I'm still standing here because of you. So whatever happens next, that part already worked. Adams nodded like that was an acceptable answer, the way only a kid can accept an unfinished one without needing it tied up. One more thing, Joon-ho said. When this is over, and it will be over, one way or another, I'm not going to forget what you did this morning. Whatever you need, whatever your mother needs, you come to me directly. Not through anyone else. Just me. Okay, Adams said, and then, quieter, almost embarrassed by it, I was really scared, you know. The whole night. I kept thinking, what if I'm wrong? What if you think I'm crazy? What if you just get in the car anyway? You weren't wrong, Joon-ho said. And I almost did get in the car anyway. That's the part that's going to keep me up at night for a long time. Joon-ho stood, brushed the dirt from his trousers, and looked through the gap in the camellias toward the gate. The fake driver had taken his phone out, put it away again, was shifting his weight the way a man does when he's been told to wait and is starting to wonder why it's taking so long. Joon-ho dialed a number from memory. Marcus, you should already be in the car. The Hartwick contract closes at 10. I'm not going to the meeting, Joon-ho said quietly. I need you to do something, and I need you to do it without telling Angel, without telling legal, without telling anyone in the building. A pause on the line. Marcus Vale had been his lawyer for 15 years and had heard this exact tone exactly once before, the morning his father's restaurant burned down. Tell me. I need every change made to my life insurance policy in the last 2 years. Every signature, every rider, every adjustment to the beneficiary clause. I need it in 90 minutes. Joon-ho, what's happening? He looked down at Adams, who looked back up at him with the steady eyes of someone twice his age. Something I should have noticed a long time ago, Joon-ho said, and ended the call. His phone rang again almost immediately. One word lit the screen. Angel. He stared at it for 3 full seconds. If he didn't answer, she would call the driver. The driver would walk up to the house. Whatever advantage he had right now, the only advantage he had, would vanish into the morning air. He pressed the green circle. Richard, where are you? The driver just texted. He's been waiting. I came back inside, he said, his voice perfectly, terribly normal. Forgot a folder. Give me 2 minutes. Hurry, darling. You know how traffic gets. I know. He hung up and looked at Adams. I need to see her, he said quietly. With my own eyes. Before I do anything else. Adams thought about this for a long moment, the way a much older person thinks. Because if you don't see her do it, he said, you might still believe she didn't. Joon-ho looked at him for a second too long. A 10-year-old in a stranger's hedge had just described the exact architecture of his own hope, in fewer words than Joon-ho could have managed himself. Exactly, he said. They moved along the edge of the house together, staying low beneath the windows, until they reached a gap in the hedge that looked out over the back patio. Angel was there. She was not alone. The man across from her had the recording's voice. Joon-ho knew it before his mind could explain how. Early 40s, the carefully maintained kind of handsome that takes effort and money, a navy jacket that fit too well to be an accident. His hand rested near Angel's on the table, not touching, but close enough that the distance itself was a kind of confession. Angel laughed at something he said. She reached over and laid her hand on top of his. By tonight, she said, just loud enough to carry across the lawn, this will all be over. Joon-ho did not feel rage. He had expected rage. What he felt instead had no name, something closer to watching a photograph of his own life slowly catch fire from the corner inward, in complete silence. He turned away from the gap in the hedge. Looked down at Adams, whose small face had gone very still. Come with me, he said. This is the part of the story where most people would have called the police and let the chips fall. Joon-ho did something else entirely, and it's about to get a lot more dangerous before it gets better. Stay with us. Like this video if your heart is pounding right now, comment what you'd do in his position, and subscribe so you don't miss where this goes. They slipped through the side door into the laundry room, a part of the house Joon-ho had lived in for 14 years and could not have described to anyone an hour earlier. He called his real driver, Marcus Webb, who was supposedly homesick that day, a lie planted, Joon-ho now understood, by someone with access to his schedule, his contacts, and his trust. Your car's not actually in the shop, is it? Joon-ho said when Marcus picked up. No, sir. Sitting in my driveway right now. I need you here. Park 1 street over. Don't come to the gate. I'll call you again. Then he turned to Adams, knelt down once more, and spoke slowly, the way you speak to someone whose courage you don't want to spend carelessly. I need you to go to your mother. Tell her your stomach hurts, that you want to lie down. Nothing else. Then stay in your room until I find you. If anyone asks where you've been, you haven't seen me since breakfast. Adams nodded. Adams. Joon-ho held the boy's eyes. What you did this morning is the bravest thing I have seen a grown man do, let alone a child. Whatever happens today, whatever you hear, I need you to remember that you saved a life. That doesn't change. Not ever. The boy's chin trembled once, just once, and then steadied. Yes, sir. Go. Adams disappeared down the hallway, and Joon-ho stood alone in the laundry room for almost a full minute, listening to a house that had felt like home for 14 years and now felt like the inside of a stranger's body. Marlene Hayes had worked in the Park household for 3 years, ever since she and Adams had left a town in West Virginia so small it didn't have a stoplight, chasing a job listing that promised steady pay and a place for her son to sleep that wasn't a relative's couch. She had built her entire sense of safety here on one principle, learned the hard way back home. Keep your head down, do good work, don't make trouble for the people who sign your check. So when Joon-ho knocked on the door of the staff cottage that evening, his face composed but his eyes carrying something she had never seen in 3 years of quiet, careful work, her first instinct, the old one, the West Virginia one, was fear. Not for Adams. For her job. For the roof over both their heads. Is he in trouble? She asked before Joon-ho could say a word, her hand still on the door frame like she might need to brace against whatever came next. No, Joon-ho said. He's not in trouble. He may have saved my life today. Marlene's hand dropped from the doorframe. He told her not everything, not yet, but enough. That there had been a plan against him that morning. That her son had overheard it and found the courage to stop him. That the people behind it didn't yet know they had failed. Marlene sat down hard in the kitchen chair across from him, the chair she usually only used for folding laundry, and put both hands flat on the table like she was trying to keep it from tipping. I knew something was wrong, she said quietly. Not this. But something. He's been quiet for a week. Drawing the same thing over and over in his notebook. I asked him 3 nights ago if something happened. He said no. Her voice cracked, just slightly, on the last word. I should have asked harder. He didn't tell you to protect you, Joon-ho said. Not because he didn't trust you. She nodded slowly, eyes wet but nothing falling yet, the particular discipline of a woman who had learned long ago that crying in front of an employer, even a kind one, even one who needed her help, was a luxury she couldn't always afford. What happens to us, she asked, if this goes wrong? If they figure out it was him? It was the most honest question anyone had asked Joon-ho all day, and it landed harder than almost anything else had because she wasn't asking about him. She was asking about her son's safety, her own job, the only stability she'd managed to build in 3 hard years, and she was asking it to the one man in the world who currently held all of that in his hands without even realizing it until just now. Nothing happens to either of you, Joon-ho said, and meant it more than he'd meant almost anything in years. Whatever this costs me, it doesn't cost you and Adams anything. You have my word. Marlene studied his face for a long moment, the way a person studies something they desperately want to believe and have been taught not to trust easily. Then she nodded, once, and folded her hands like she was praying or bracing herself, possibly both. Then tell me what you need, she said. I need you both safe, and I need this to stay quiet a little longer. That's all, for now. He paused, then added something he hadn't planned to say until it was already out of his mouth. I should have known your name before today. 3 years, and I knew the lawn got mowed and the laundry got done, and I never once asked what town you were from. Marlene almost laughed, surprised by it. West Virginia. Place so small the gas station closes at 6. She looked down at her hands. I came out here because a flyer in a church bulletin said a family needed live-in help and would cover housing. I didn't ask too many questions about who the family was. I just needed somewhere for my boy to have his own room. And now your boy's the reason I'm alive. Don't say that like it's a nice thing that happened, she said, sharper than she meant to, and then softened immediately. Sorry. I keep picturing him standing in that driveway. 10 years old. What if it had gone different? What if you just walked past him? I almost did. She closed her eyes briefly. Don't tell me that part. I'm telling you because you deserve to know exactly how close it was, and because I need you to understand that I'm not going to let anything happen to either of you over this. Not your job. Not your housing. Not anything. He leaned forward slightly. I know what it's like to have nothing solid under you. I grew up over my father's restaurant in a neighborhood where one bad month meant we didn't make rent. I haven't forgotten what that fear feels like, even though I don't live inside it anymore. Marlene studied him for a long moment, the way a person studies something they desperately want to believe and have been taught not to trust easily. Then tell me what you need, she said again, and this time it wasn't a question, it was an answer. Marcus Vale called at 6:40 that evening with the insurance documents spread out on a borrowed kitchen table in a hotel room across town, a room Joon-ho had checked into under a name that wasn't his, paid for on a card that wouldn't trace back to anything. Policy was adjusted 14 months ago, Marcus said. Coverage raised from 12 million to 35. Accidental death rider added, doubling the payout under specific conditions. Beneficiary clause simplified, no waiting period. No contestable provisions. Angel is the sole beneficiary. There's a signature, Marcus continued, witnessed by a notary in Pasadena. I made calls this afternoon. The notary retired 4 months ago. Hasn't answered his phone in 2 weeks. Joon-ho stared at the printed signature at the bottom of the page. He recognized the shape of it, the small upward curl he always put at the end of his own name. He had no memory of signing it. I was in Singapore that week, he said quietly. I remember the trip. I remember the merger closing while I was gone. I know, Marcus said. I checked your travel records before I called you. Neither man said anything for a moment. Somewhere outside the hotel window, the city kept moving, indifferent to the fact that a marriage of 20 years had just been confirmed, on paper, to be a murder plot with a notarized signature. "I want to see her," Joon-ho said finally. "Tonight. Not a lawyer in the room. Not the police. Just her and me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, the quiet of a lawyer whose entire professional instinct screamed against what he was about to allow. "That's not what I'd advise," he said. "I didn't ask what you'd advise." Another pause. "Then I'll be in the car outside. The whole time." Before he hung up, Marcus added one more thing, quieter. "Joon-ho. Whatever she says in there, you don't owe her an explanation for what happens next. You don't owe her gentleness either. 20 years doesn't buy her that." "I know. Do you, though?" Joon-ho didn't answer right away, because he genuinely didn't know. Somewhere underneath the anger and the grief, a smaller, more humiliating voice kept asking whether there had been some version of the last few years where he could have prevented this, fewer trips, more questions at breakfast, an actual conversation instead of a phone screen. He hated that voice. He couldn't make it stop. "I'll call you after," he said, and ended the call before Marcus could press further. If you've ever loved someone enough that finding out the truth would break you worse than any stranger ever could, this next part is for you. Like the video right now if you already know this scene is going to hurt, and subscribe, because what happens next is the heart of this entire story. Angel was in the garden room when he came home, exactly where she always sat in the evenings, a cup of tea going cold on the side table, her face turned toward the dark window like she was looking for him in the reflection before he'd even arrived. She stood when she saw him. "Where have you been?" "I've been calling for hours. The driver said you just disappeared. I thought something happened to you." "Something did happen to me," Joon-ho said quietly. "Today. In the driveway. I think you know what." He watched her face change in real time, not in one collapse, but in stages, like watching ice take its first cracks before the whole surface gives. The warmth didn't disappear immediately. It just started to look like something worn over something else. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice had already lost its footing. "There was a recording, Angel." The room went completely silent. Outside, a sprinkler ticked on somewhere on the lawn, absurdly ordinary, the only sound in the world. She sat back down slowly, like her legs had simply stopped being willing to hold her. For a long moment she said nothing at all, and Joon-ho stood there, 20 years of marriage compressed into the silence between them, waiting to find out which version of his wife was about to answer him. "How long?" he said, and his voice finally cracked, the first time it had all day. "How long have you been planning to watch me die, Angel? Was it during the Singapore trip? Was it at my mother's funeral, when you held my hand in the front row? Tell me how far back this goes, because I need to know how much of my life I actually lived and how much of it I just imagined." "Joon-ho. Was the wedding real? Was any of it real, or was I just useful for 19 years until I stopped being useful enough to keep around?" "Don't do that." For the first time, something flared in her, not guilt, something closer to defensiveness, raw and immediate. "Don't you dare turn this into me never loving you. That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" His voice rose, sharp enough that it startled them both. "Because from where I'm standing, my wife paid a stranger to put me in a reservoir. I didn't pay anyone." She stopped herself, realizing too late what she'd confirmed. The silence that followed was its own kind of verdict. "I didn't want this," she finally said, and her voice broke completely on the last word. "Joon-ho, I swear to you, there were 100 nights I almost called it off. But you didn't." "No." She looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd walked in, her eyes weren't performing anything. They were just devastated, just exhausted, just true. "Do you know what it's like to disappear inside your own house? To sit across from someone for 19 years and watch him look at his phone instead of you, and tell yourself it's fine, it's just how successful men are, and one day you wake up and you can't remember the last time he asked how you actually were, not your day, not the dinner party, you." "That doesn't answer the question." "I know it doesn't." The words came out raw, almost a sob. "I know there's no answer that makes this okay. I just need you to understand it didn't start as this. It started as wanting to be seen by someone again. And then it became a plan. I kept telling myself I'd stop, and I never stopped, and somewhere in there I think I stopped being able to tell the difference between the woman who loved you and the one who'd already decided you were worth more to her. Gone. Joon-ho felt something in his chest tear slowly down the middle, not surprise, not even anger exactly, but the specific grief of hearing the absolute truth from someone and realizing the truth was somehow worse than a lie would have been. A lie he could have hated cleanly. This, a woman who had loved him, who had also, separately, chosen this, gave him nothing clean to hold on to at all. 19 years, he said quietly. I would have given you anything. All you had to do was ask. I know that now. Her hands were shaking in her lap. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't think I expect to forgive myself. I just need you to know it wasn't never real. I loved you. And I was going to let you die anyway. Both of those things happened in the same person, and I don't have an answer for how. Joon-ho stood very still for a long moment, looking at the woman he had built an empire beside, the woman who used to fall asleep in his car outside his father's restaurant because neither of them could afford to heat 2 apartments. He searched himself for the rage he had expected to feel, the kind that would make this simple. It never came. What came instead was quieter and much heavier, a grief with no bottom to it. I need you to leave the house tonight, he said finally. Marcus is outside. He'll handle everything else through the lawyers, not through me. I won't go to the police, Angel. Not for this. But I will never let you near me again, and I need you to understand that's not punishment. It's just what's true now. She nodded, tears finally falling without resistance, and said nothing else, because there was nothing else to say that wouldn't make it worse. He turned and walked out of the garden room without looking back, and somewhere behind him he heard her start to cry in earnest, and he let himself feel, for one brief and complicated second, that he was crying too, on the inside, in a place no one would ever see. This is the moment everything changes, not with police lights or handcuffs, but with a quiet kind of ending that might be the most painful one of all. If this scene hit you the way it hit us writing it, like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe. There's still more story left, and it's not finished breaking your heart yet. The man from the recording was never charged with anything beyond a restraining order Joon-ho's lawyers filed within the week. There had been no actual attempt yet, Marcus explained, nothing beyond conspiracy that could be proven without dragging Adams and his cracked phone into a courtroom, something Joon-ho refused outright, no matter what Marcus argued. His 10, Joon-ho said simply, the only time he raised his voice during the entire legal conversation. He doesn't testify against anyone. Ever. Find another way. Marcus found another way. It took 6 weeks, a forensic accountant, and a very motivated private investigator named Hannah Reyes, but the fake driver, a man with 3 prior arrests and a habit of disappearing under new names, eventually gave a statement in exchange for a reduced sentence on an unrelated charge, enough to keep the case quietly alive without a single word from Adams ever entering a record anywhere. Angel was never charged. There hadn't been a crime completed, only a plan, and Joon-ho, even now, even knowing everything, found he didn't have it in him to spend the rest of his life in courtrooms chasing a conviction. The divorce alone took almost everything from her that mattered. He let that be enough. Marcus showed up at the house most evenings that month, ostensibly for paperwork, mostly because neither of them said out loud that they were checking on each other. One night, halfway through signing off on a stack of separation documents, Marcus set down his pen and looked at Joon-ho across the desk. You know, in 15 years, you've never once given me an easy case. You love it. I really don't. Marcus rubbed his eyes. Last year it was the merger. This year it's an attempted murder disguised as a paperwork error. What's next year? You adopt a tiger? Don't tempt me. I'm serious, Joon-ho. Most clients call me about a contract dispute. You call me about staying alive. You bill me the same either way. Marcus almost smiled, the first real one Joon-ho had seen on him in weeks. That part's true, he admitted, and went back to the paperwork, and for a few minutes the two of them sat in something that almost resembled normal, which after the month they'd had felt like its own small miracle. The house changed in the months after, not the way houses change after a death, but the way they change after a long fever finally breaks. Joon-ho moved into a smaller room on the east side, where the morning light came in clean through windows that had never been opened in years. He gave Marcus Webb a permanent position with full benefits, over the man's polite but insistent objections. He hired a household manager named Doris who'd run a bed and breakfast in Vermont for 30 years, and for the first time in a long time, the place actually felt like somewhere people lived instead of somewhere people performed living. Marlene stayed. He'd asked if she wanted to, and she'd taken 3 days to think it over before saying yes, and when she did, he moved her and Adams into the larger cottage near the south garden, the one with the real fireplace, and told her, flatly, that her son's tuition was covered for as long as there was a school to attend, and that this wasn't charity, it was a debt, and debts get paid. Almost 6 months after the morning behind the camellia hedge, Joon-ho walked out into the garden on a Saturday and found Adams sitting on the low stone wall near the greenhouse, a notebook open on his knees, sketching the new roses Doris had planted along the fence. Still drawing, Joon-ho said, sitting down beside him. My dad used to draw, Adams said. My mom says he drew on everything. Napkins. Receipts. The backs of bills. Joon-ho hadn't known that. He filed it away gently, the way he'd learned to file away small true things about people he cared about. Then you come by it honestly, he said. They sat in silence for a while, watching wind move through the new leaves. Mr. Park, Adams said eventually. Do you ever still get scared about that morning? Joon-ho thought about the question seriously, the way it deserved. Sometimes, he said. Not the way I felt it then. But sometimes I wake up at 2 in the morning and I hear that car engine in my head, and I think about how close I came to walking past you without stopping. And what I feel isn't really fear anymore. It's something more like gratitude that hasn't figured out how to sit still yet. Adams nodded slowly, in the particular way children understand things that adults often can't find words for. My mom says doing the right thing doesn't always make your life easier, he said. But it lets you look in the mirror without having to look away. Joon-ho looked out across the garden, the late light catching the glass of the greenhouse, gold and quiet and ordinary in a way the world hadn't felt to him in a very long time. Your mom, he said, has been right about almost everything. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved us putting it together, that's exactly why we make these. Like this video, tell us in the comments which moment hit you hardest, and subscribe so you're here for the next one, because the bravest people in these stories are very rarely the ones with the most power. They're the ones who speak up anyway, even when they have the least to gain and the most to lose.